Hello, hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Homecomings podcast. I'm your host, Evelina Olachowska, multi-passionate creative soul, brand strategist, designer, and founder of my dear design studio, Studio Donka. If you are tuning in today to episode 2, I am so excited to have you here. If you have not listened to the first episode that I dropped last week, I highly encourage you guys to go back and give it a listen. This season is a little different from the first two in the sense that it's kind of meant to be listened chronologically because it's following a bit of a structure and a flow. And you'll understand more and more as we dive deeper into each episode that listening in chronological order, if you want to get the full experience, is going to be very, very helpful for you guys, because essentially what I'm doing is I'm walking everyone through my intimate process and journey and focusing and honing in specifically on personal branding and what it takes to craft an authentically aligned personal brand. I have worked with so many clients, including myself. And that's actually something that I want to mention is if you're a business owner tuning in, how often do you forget to consider yourself as a client? Because I'm so guilty of this for the first 2.5 years of my business. I was not a client at all. And if you think about it, if we're leading personal brands, especially as business owners, like we are client one, we are client number one. So prioritizing ourselves is of the utmost importance. But I understand that sometimes, and actually I want to say more often than not, can't happen at the beginning because we're trying to get by. We're trying to, garner the clients and grow and do all the things that we neglect ourselves in the process. And maybe I'll even back up and kind of just like connect this to the bigger picture of life in general. Like, how many times do we live life putting ourselves on the back burner, whether it's saying yes when we want to say no, or staying in an unfulfilling job or relationship for longer than we probably feel like we should be in? It's like we're met with these moments in our lives that we kind of just lose ourselves a little bit. Like we just get disconnected from our inherent essence. And I believe the journey of life, not to sound too dramatic and grand, but truly it's about coming back home to yourself. And so the Homecomings podcast, my first personal branding group container that I launched earlier this year that inspired the context of this season, Homecomings. And yes, it's about the metaphor of home that is central to Studio Domka, which is my brand. Domka meaning home in Polish, because that's a part of my story. But the more broader, general, overarching theme of homecoming is this idea that we're all meant to come back home to ourselves. And so through my personal purpose, which is connecting humans to their own purpose, which I love to do through my business and my brand, I have come to find and understand this metaphor of coming back home to yourself and applying it within the realm of branding, because that's my love language. That's what I love to do. Other people could do it through their artistic expression, through music. Even something like you can think about being a mom and raising your children, or if you're working a full-time corporate 9 to 5, whatever your title or position or calling is, we all have our ways of living our lives and expressing ourselves. And whether or not we're doing that in our deepest alignment for ourselves is the ultimate question. And what that requires to know whether or not you're living in alignment is really this really important part, which is getting personal, which I feel like a lot of people unfortunately neglected, and especially in the context of branding. Rarely, if ever, have I seen this piece of the puzzle ingrained. And I just want to back up for a second and speak to the larger idea of what is a personal brand. I mentioned it in last week's episode around the fact that you don't have to be a business owner to have a personal brand. In fact, everyone has a personal brand, whether you are that mom or full-time accountant or whatever that is. Your personal brand is an inherent expression of who you are, and it's how you show up in the world. And it's reflected by the buying decisions, the brands you support, the products you love, your inherent personality, your style, who you are. Like all of this stuff makes you you. You are the brand of Jessica or Robert or whoever, like insert your name, right? And so for me, for Evelina, what is my personal brand? Yes, I have my business now. And this especially gets like really deep and beautiful when you do have a business, because then you could start to craft and think like, okay, how am I translating and expressing myself in my business? There's layers to this, and this is exactly and especially where I love to dive in, and what I've really recognized in the last few years is my superpower. As you know, I'm entering my year 4 in business now, and I've kind of like finally in that sweet spot of knowing like, yes, like this is my niche. Like I finally found it. It's the personal brand, it's the solopreneur, it is the creative, it is the artist, it is the consultant, it is the service provider that is really an extension of their brand. So if you are someone tuning in and listening that is the solopreneur, the solo entrepreneur that has their own business, providing some sort of a service or an offering, this season will especially be potent and helpful for you, because this I find is the most beautiful container. Not to say that if you're a product-based business this isn't as applicable, but it's even more so I find important when you are a human presenting yourself as your business, to get personal and think about these important things, because humans love to work and connect and buy from other humans. And so the more human that you could be, the more that your brand and business is going to impact your consumer, your client, your audience, whoever it is you are serving. And I find time and time again the mistake, or I don't want to say the mistake, but the miss that a lot of personal brands have is they're not getting personal enough. So this is exactly where we're starting today, where we're going to be diving into, and I felt was so important before we even start to set the foundation, again, following our branding blueprint, we need to dive deep and unearth and excavate. So this is the first part. It's the excavation. And what does that mean? What does that mean in objective terms? When you think about building a house, you have to excavate the land and prep the land before you even start construction. And if you think about it in the context of personal branding, you have to get personal first and understand really on a core level who you are, because it all starts here, friends. So why get personal? Like you're probably listening, you're like, well, I do social media consulting. Like, why do people like, what does it matter to me to like get personal? Why do people care? Right? I think this is a question that we get caught up in so much. It's like, who cares? Uh, Everyone cares. Like, and this is actually something to consider before I even dive in and start talking about this personal part, is take a moment and pause and consider who you are attracted to, in the context of who you follow online, influencer space, like who really calls your attention and why do you admire them? Or anyone in general, like a family member or a friend or a partner. Like, what is it about people that you find attractive or that connects you deeply? And more often than not, I can just spew out some examples. Vulnerability, authenticity, someone's stories, someone's unique style, all those things. People who express themselves, who openly show up and lead from this place of expression and putting their inherent selves out into the world, they are leading from this place of openness. And so it's a really powerful question to ask yourself if you are stuck or caught up in maybe a personal block or an uncertainty around why things feel disconnected for you in your business or in your personal life, or why you might always be comparing yourself to other people or feeling those symptoms of like not enoughness or imposter syndrome. This is where asking yourself the question of like, okay, what attracts me to someone else, and what about them can I imbue in myself? Not from a place of comparison, because this is where the distinction needs to be made. We're not copying someone's style, or we're not comparing and thinking they're better than. We're taking notes. We're doing research and understanding what is it about me that I am attracted to in that person. Because what's really powerful to understand this concept, one of my current mentors that I'm working with shared this beautiful perspective with me that I really try to be mindful of around this idea that everyone is a mirror for us, right? So something we admire or are jealous of, especially if we're jealous of in others, is just a reflection for ourselves. So think about what really triggers you in other people, both good and bad, whether we admire something in them, whether they make us jealous or envious of something, because that is always a telltale sign and a reflection, a true mirror in the sense of something about us. As an example, I am jealous of the other brand strategist and designer that has like the most beautiful aesthetic and is always posting regularly and consistently online and just has her shit together. What could that be telling about me? Maybe that I have an opportunity to also own my aesthetic. Maybe that's an opportunity for me to take a step back and recognize, like, okay, I actually have it together too. And if she's leading from a place of like ownership, then maybe I should lead from a place of ownership because I have my shit too. And I have an opportunity to really embrace all that I am. If, like I mentioned, there's a trigger around her showing up consistently every single day. Maybe that's a reflection that I might need to get my shit together a little bit more. And like, if I'm avoiding something, if I'm putting something off and I don't have a clear set schedule because fear or imposter syndrome, that trigger is more than likely an invitation that I just need to kind of get my ass in gear a little bit and just do the same thing because what makes me different from that person, right? So it's always just paying attention and really being mindful of people as teachers, humans as teachers. That concept for me has like radically changed my perspective on life because now I'm like super conscious and paying attention to like anyone I come in contact with of like, who, okay, oh, I really like this about you. But at the end of the day, that's something that I probably really like about myself too. Or, oh, if I'm envious about you and that thing that you have, then like that's an opportunity for me to look at my own shit and own or claim something that I'm not acknowledging. Like, mind blowing concept when I truly wrap my mind around it. So that is a little wisdom nugget number one in this conversation is pay attention to the people that are in your surroundings that both influence you for, we could say, good air quotes and bad air quotes, and see, just like, again, do a little bit of like inquiry and research, leave the emotions out of it or invite the emotions but be aware of the emotions. I think there's a distinction there, inviting them but not letting them take over, and pay attention and ask them, like, jealousy, like, what are you telling me here? Or anger, what do you have for me? Anger, like, tell me. Like, tell me what you're trying to tell me right now. And just pay attention, grab your journal, grab your Brain FM, your focus music, and let me know, friends. I mean, I'd love to hear, but if not, just like keep it to yourself. Do the personal inquiry and the deep dive and just sit with what comes up, because I don't doubt that there could be some very telling clues from that experience, because they sure have come up for me, truly. So back to the human part and back to getting personal and why it's so important. So your brand, especially if you have a business, they are inherent extensions of you, like I mentioned. And so the more that we can understand the you, the more that we could craft a brand that reflects who you are or who you might desire to be. And the more that you can share your you, the more that you can show up from this place of authenticity, of truth, of vulnerability, the more that your brand will attract your aligned people, your audience, your customers, your clients, your consumers, all of that stuff. And so where does personal development come into the mix? This is all about knowing yourself. And like, it could seem like such a simple question, but if you consider, like, who are you really? How do you answer that, right? Because, like, who am I? How does one say? Do you lead with the label, the title? Because, in a way, whether or not you've embraced the multi passionate label or not, we all are multi passionate because we're not just all one thing. I mean, you could think about it. You can make a list of all the different things, right, that you are. I could call myself by my career, which would be brand strategist or designer, or I could call myself according to my family, which is daughter or sister or niece or granddaughter. Or I could call myself in the context of, I don't know, just human connection, friend. um I'm blanking at friend, sure, I mean, anything, right? So like, it is such a dense question to ask when you really start to look beyond the labels, because it starts to kind of like poke and prod at, like, okay, so what is my core essence and where do I even want to go with this, right? And so this is where personal development really comes in. And when I say personal development, you may be wondering, like, what do you mean by that, Evelina, right? Essentially, it's the journey and the process of coming to understand who you are. And this could look mean, the personal development space, maybe because I've been in it so deeply, like so entrenched in the last couple of years that I feel like I see it everywhere. But I think for, many of us listening, if you're new, if you're tuning in, if you're not privy to this, to just like set a really foundational kind of explanation around what this could be. Again, the journey of coming to know yourself deeply. What are the tools related to personal development that can help you in getting there? For me, it's been podcasts, it's been books, it's been mentorship, it's been, any of these resources where someone who we can say is a little bit farther along on your journey, someone who's been through the process already is guiding you, whether that's an author from a book that you're reading or a coach that you're working with that's breaking down their process and illuminating things for you. It's really the journey of coming to garner more awareness and consciousness of you, your surroundings, your behaviors, the people in your life. A lot of it too is taking ownership of all that you are. Moments and areas of your life where you have played out in victim mentality or mindset, moments where you have neglected yourself. Again, this is coming back to that disconnection from yourself, the journey of coming back home to yourself. So all of that could be considered in the personal development world. And my personal development journey started 5-ish, 6-ish years ago after a rock bottom moment of my life where honestly, in most case scenarios, for most people, that's usually when it happens. Like you just hit a freaking low in life, you get triggered, you get activated by something, whether it's a health concern, whether it's a breakup, whether it's a move, it's like a big life change, right? And then like, it's like a portal opens up and you're like, oh my God, now is an opportunity for me to like finally, air quotes, come to know myself. Like I was 27, 28 at the time. I'm like, how have I been living all this time, like all my life without like really coming to know myself? It's a really trippy concept if you haven't experienced it, of like getting to that moment where you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like, this is an edge for me to come to know myself a little bit deeper. And so, from that point, from that journey that started 5 or 6 years ago, I've been diving deeper and deeper and deeper. And it really, really got activated when I started working with my first mentor. When I had started my business 3.5 years ago, I have to plug my dear coach, Jamie Harena, who came into my life at such an unexpected moment, but a perfect moment to really guide me in diving deeper into understanding all these different parts of you. So when I say coaching or mentorship as a tool for personal development, one of the best, truly one of the best, because there's nothing quite like working with someone who has been through their own struggles that can really just, it's almost like fast tracking the process for you. Like you could do it yourself, right? Like you could read the manual, like reading a book, or you can work with someone like a teacher who's already done it and just will show you their methodology. And it just, again, fast tracks that process for you so deeply. Now, in this personal development journey, when we're in the process of coming to really get to know ourselves deeper, a lot of stuff can become unearthed, and a lot of emotions specifically, whether that is shame or guilt or humiliation or embarrassment or anger, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that part of me that was doing that thing for myself. Like I can speak to my people pleasing tendencies, the part of me that has been judgmental and like didn't have the awareness to like live life from a place of judgment. Like I really came to know these parts and pieces of myself. But beyond all that can become unearthed, there's also, and I think this is the knock, while I'm so grateful to personal development because it's truly changed my life and it's helped me connect so much with myself. It's gotten so, there's so much, right? Like in any industry or space, the little spark starts to flicker and then like whoosh, the fire starts burning, right? And then like everyone's doing personal development, all the books are out, and buy my course, buy my program, do this, blah, blah, blah. And so there's been like a dark side, if we want to say, of the personal development space that has come up. That's honestly, now that I'm seeing it, that honestly has just kind of soured the experience for me in a way, because it's been such a powerful tool for me to, yes, help me understand myself deeper, but it also can place so much weight on all the negativity. Like, sit in your shame, sit in all your shit, like do the hard work, right? The inner child stuff, the shadow work, all of this. If you are tuning in and you've done any of the self-inquiry, like the deep self-inquiry, like shadow work and inner child stuff, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like it could get really heavy to like revisit past traumas and like put yourself back in that place to heal, and feeling maybe oftentimes, and I'm only saying this because I can speak for myself, and that like feeling like you're broken, right? Like something is wrong with you and you need to constantly keep working and fixing yourself. I'll be the first to admit I have over invested money in the space, overread the books, overpaid the coaches and mentors, constantly feeling like someone needs to give me an answer. Someone needs to guide me and showing me and telling me what it is I need to do, what it is I need to fix. Like keep peeling back the layers, keep getting better. I'm addicted to bettering myself. Every day I want to be the best version of myself, but I have to be real with myself and also admitting that I have gotten sucked in. I have gotten sucked in, friends, many times into all the things. And this stems from, again, like I mentioned, the books and the coaching, to even things like astrology and human design. And again, all these tools and modalities that can be so powerful and good to use and support you. But if you're not conscious of it, you could get so lured in and sucked in. So just for anyone tuning in and just dabbling in the space, this is just my personal experience. I tend to have a very addictive personality when it comes to these things. I've been addicted to working out, and I've been addicted to weighing, measuring food. And I had my own orthorexia journey, which is a podcast on its own. But when it's come to this space, and it's such a sneaky space too, because you think like, oh my gosh, you're doing all these amazing good things, right? Like you're coming to know yourself. How could this possibly be toxic or bad? It's when you start to really get pulled away from yourself. Again, the journey of coming back home to yourself, it's a journey of you. And you ultimately have all the answers you need. And so when you outsource that power, yes, there's a difference. And this is like where it gets tricky, that discernment of knowing like where I need support, where I need someone to guide me and assist me and helping me figure this out, and where I might be sneakily like outsourcing my power and having someone like give me the answer. Cause I gotta admit, y'all, like I am very guilty of that. Like that's happened before. And so this is where I had to take a very hard stop last year. It was actually last spring. I was working with 3 mentors, you guys, 3 mentors at one time, spending so much money on all of this stuff. Not for nothing, it has changed my life and impacted me in so many powerful ways. But there was just a moment where like enough is enough, Evelina. Like you can do this on your own. Like you can figure it out. Like you have the tools at this point. And this goes back to a huge talking point I made in last week's episode around this like point in your life where you get to where you have to go from student to teacher. You have to really just call yourself out and acknowledge that you are ready. And sometimes someone can come along and tell you like, whoa, okay, you got to do this. You got to launch this course. You got to do this thing, whatever, because they see that in you. And that is powerful when you have people in your life that could reflect to you what you might not be seeing. But at the end of the day, you have to give that to yourself, friends, because if you can't give it to yourself, then like no one else can. Someone could like compliment you, yeah, but if that's not landing for you and if you're not taking initiative to do it yourself, ooh, that's a dangerous place. Eventually, again, the hope and the trick is like doing it yourself. So I got to a point where I realized like I got this. It was scary. At first, I was like so tempted to reach out to a mentor of like a previous mentor of mine to guide me and support me and like, okay, how do I figure this out? What do I do? I got through it, you guys. I got through it. And so can you, if you're tuning in and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm on the hamster wheel of all this stuff. Back to the point that I was trying to make, though, around the darkness, we can say, of the personal development space, there can tend to be such a focus on all the negativity that you kind of forget the positivity of that, right? Because in the process of coming to know yourself, yes, you're unearthing maybe all the unconscious beliefs or behaviors or patterns or ways that you've been acting out and living your life, but you're also learning the beautiful parts and pieces of you, right? And this is the focus of and where I want to put my attention towards for this episode, and really what I try to lean into and embrace in my process when I work with clients. It's like, let's unearth all these beautiful, wonderful, amazing, like incredible pieces of you that you're not seeing for yourself because either you have neglected them or someone told you that you weren't good enough or you have compared yourself all your life. Like, let's get to those bits and pieces. And like, sure, if emotions come up, if there's any shame or guilt or imposter syndrome, like, yes, let's acknowledge them, but let's not put all the weight there because we don't have time for that. And like, life is not about that. Life is not about sitting in the suck all the time. If you come up with a feeling, if you come up with resistance, like let's not dismiss it. Let's not push it to the side because that is going to keep bubbling up. That is going to keep following you until you acknowledge it. the trick really, what I have garnered at this point in my journey, at least, is acceptance. Like that word. And it's a constant journey truly for me to still come to understand what that word fully means, but accepting whatever it is you're navigating, accepting an emotion, accepting a situation, and surrendering, releasing control, releasing the what ifs and shoulds and oh my goodness, like all those things, and just like being in the moment. Shout out to Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, as I'm diving into his book. Like, it is so good, friends. And it's like reminding me, ooh, like the real power of being and letting go of like all of that stuff, right? But coming back to the positive aspects and attributes, this is the part that is so important that I really like to lean and focus on in this first excavation module around coming to know yourself. Let's ask ourselves some really powerful questions around who you are and how you show up in the world. And let's see how we can understand those parts and pieces of us and then weave them into our brand. So this is where the personal development like process and journey really gets embedded in my personal brand expression process. It's about really coming to understand the beautiful parts around our lives. So, some questions to know yourself and to really understand who you are. Let's take a temperature check of where we're at in our lives. If you are sitting by a lovely computer or are on your cell phone, which I imagine you probably are, because I don't know how else you'd be listening to this podcast episode if you weren't, feel free to Google Wheel of Life and click on any image that pops up. And you will get a lovely little pie chart of different categories: personal growth, career, friends and family, physical environment, finances, fun and recreation, health, romance. There could be different variations of this, but this, my friends, is a really powerful base to start to understand and take inventory of where we're at in our lives. And this is related to the most important, powerful categories in our lives, things like our jobs, things like the people in our lives, our health and wellness, our spirituality. Let's take inventory and ask yourself, where are you at in your life right now, both personally, professionally, in these 8 categories? What feels in alignment and what doesn't? And maybe rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How do these different categories in your life feel? And understanding the fact that not all these different categories on this wheel are always going to be at 100% because we're in different seasons of our lives. We're seasonal, cyclical creatures, just like everything else in nature, just like the plant that withers away and dies every season and then regrows and blooms new buds in the summer, right? Like, or the spring, whatever. So this is all to say, like, things come and go in our lives. We enter different periods of our lives where maybe at one point we're absolutely rocking career and finances, but our personal life is like burning. Like, there's a dumpster fire going on and we need to address that, right? So maybe career and finances are like at a 9, but then like family and friends are like a 2. Maybe you just navigated a tough breakup. Like, like what's going on, right? So I love this exercise. I love this diagram to check in with at least once a year. I mean, usually, I don't necessarily really believe in New Year's resolutions, but I do like to use these markers as moments just to check in with myself of like, where am I at? Top of the new year could be a great way to do it on your birthday. Or maybe just like a random Wednesday in the middle of July because you feel like it. Why not, right? But pick a day, pick a moment where you could just sit down. And I encourage everyone listening, set the context, set the scene, grab your favorite cup of tea, cozy blanket, some nice ambient music, and just get in the zone and really tune into how these different categories in your lives feel. And another powerful question that I like to ask myself sometimes, this was actually inspired from, I forget what it was, a question card game. Because question cards are like all the rage right now. And I absolutely love them for connecting with people and just getting to know someone more deeply and intimately. Shout out to We're Not Really Strangers because your game absolutely rocks. But I think I got this question from one of these games, and it was, if the 8-year-old version of you could see you now, what would he or she think? Like, if you think back to the little version of you looking at your life right now, is she proud? Is she happy? Is she satisfied? Is she disappointed? Is she sad? Did you have a different version of what your life would look like when you were 8 years old compared to where you are now? This question could be so powerful and telling to just give you, again, like a little bit of a temperature check of where you're at. Because if you're killing it, if you're totally satisfied and you're like, I am in such a good place and I'm feeling so great, then like, yes, let's keep going. Let's unearth, like, let's really like keep the ball rolling, right? But if you're not, let's take a step back, take inventory and understand like what's going awry? Like what's not really kind of sitting well? Is it the career stuff? Is it the family and friends? Is it the finances? Is it the romance or the what is that, right? And you're probably wondering, like, well, what is my health or what do my family or my friends have to do with where I am at and anything to do with my personal brand? Again, friends, before we even start to think about a logo or colors, we're coming to understand where we're at and who we are. And this is a really core place just to get, again, like a little bit of a base metric of where we're at. So you're probably thinking, what does romance or like my boyfriend or my family or my friends have anything to do with my brand or business, right? Remember, friends, we are starting deep, like we are unearthing. So before we even start to think about what our logo is going to be, before we even start to consider what I'm positioning myself as, what my services are, we are getting to the core of who you are. And it starts with just getting a temperature check of your current situation. And I want to quote and reference, and I've done this probably who knows how many times on the show already, my first dear mentor, Jamie Harina, her profound quote that she has shared with me when we had first started working together, and that there's no such thing as business problems. It's personal problems that bleed into your business because everything is so intertwined and connected. So more often than not, where you are experiencing a wall or frustration in your business could more often than not be connected to a deeper rooted pattern or limiting belief or whatever it is that you want to call it, like a resistance, like a moment of resistance in your personal life. You can think of anything and everything as an example of something like boundaries. I remember when I had started my business, I was having such a hard time saying no. And this, again, in the first year of business, if you're someone listening who's just fresh and starting off and the ball is rolling, like saying yes is powerful because you want to get as much experience as you possibly can. And you want to understand, you want to work with all the different clients and all of that stuff. But there comes a point where, you have a lot on your plate. Maybe you start to kind of recognize the work that aligns for you and the work that doesn't. Maybe you're at a place that like, you don't need to take on every opportunity because you have enough money getting you by every month, but you feel too guilty or too bad telling someone no. And so this kept showing up for me time and time again in my business. I kept saying yes when deep down I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this job. What did that deeply actually mean for me? Well, it just revealed my people pleasing tendencies. Beyond business stuff aside, I had to face and acknowledge the fact that like I deeply am terrified of disappointing people. Like telling someone no and like potentially facing their disappointment or their anger is terrifying for me. And so, yes, I do that in my personal life. I mean, that's where it all starts, right? With family, with friends, etc. But when you're doing business and it comes to a professional relationship with clients and, you know, contractors and all this different stuff, that carries over unless you look at the root cause, unless you look at, oh my gosh, I'm doing this in like all different aspects of my life and you accept it. Again, going back to that word accepting, you accept it, you release it, you acknowledge it, you let it go. You're like, okay, fuck. Like you get the awareness of it that like, okay, this is a pattern that I'm playing out. And then you just sit with it and you're like, okay, I acknowledge that I've been doing this. I I surrender. You release it, you let it go. If there's feelings that come up, if there's shame or guilt or anything that you're experiencing, you let it be. You feel the feels. This is that expression, like feel your emotions, feel the feelings. It's so much harder than it sounds. Truly, like this is where the mentorship could be so powerful because when I first started kind of doing this work, I'm like, I didn't know what it meant to connect with my emotions. Like I had never really experienced true anger before. I wasn't allowing myself to fully feel it. I was suppressing it. I didn't know that that was a feeling that I could really experience in my body. And every emotion has different ways that you process and you navigate stuff. With anger, for example, like punching a pillow and screaming in your car, I'm telling you guys, are powerful things. Like some of these things you really have to feel somatically, which means through your body. And again, this is just where mentorship can be so powerful. And again, reading books can help you too, and listening to all the podcasts, all that stuff. But really learning and becoming aware of your emotions and your feelings can be so impactful. because this is exactly what helps you move through these things, these feelings that come up as you start to come to know yourself a little bit deeper. So to go back to that people pleasing example, I was working with Jamie, my mentor at the time, and this became so clear for me, those moments where I feared disappointing people so much. And it was really a journey of acknowledging, okay, I've done this all my life. This doesn't have to be my story anymore. I could let it go. I did dive deep. I kind of, connected to where it was formed. It was related to my parents. I always wanted to make my parents proud. I didn't want to fear disappointing anyone, especially my mom and my dad. So acknowledging all that stuff and then letting it go. And then it's really a matter of paying attention to how often this pattern continues to creep up, because you're going to keep getting tested, right? Like, it's like once you start to get the awareness of the situation, it's almost like God will like drop these little tests your way to be like, are you sure you got a handle on that? Because here's an opportunity where you can be activated and triggered again. But let's see if you actually are activated or if you choose to do something differently. Again, friends, you always have a choice. This is something that I try to remind myself every day too. It's like, no matter what, you always have the choice to do differently. Just because you did something in the past one way does not mean that that has to be your story this way. Like every moment in the present is a moment to choose differently. And if you especially have garnered awareness or have come to know a behavior or pattern of you, you don't have to keep doing it again. And so, especially when it comes to something like personal branding, again, tying it back to personal branding, this is also an opportunity where you could choose to do different. Your services, how you're presenting them, the conversations you're having with your clients, the way that you're talking about yourself, the way that you're pricing your services or your offerings. Like every single day is an opportunity to choose different. And the way that choosing different actually becomes easier is the more that you come to know yourself. So back to this wheel of life, I encourage everyone listening, just take a moment, take out your journal. If you're a phone person or a MacBook, Apple Notes, whatever it is person, really sit with this and just take inventory of where you're at in your life and what parts and pieces you may need to focus on. And the second part of this is those areas that are a little awry or don't really feel like they are up to your standards, we could say, or basically where, if you're not at where you want to be, jot down where you do want to be. Jot down what needs to change, what you want to do differently, what you really want to embrace and embody in your life, whether that is business, fun, recreation, romance, personal growth, whatever that is, those parts of the pie that have like a 1 or like a 10%, dream into what 100% would look like. Dream into what if you were to score this thing a 10 next year? Like, what would you be doing? Who would you be talking with? What would you be doing? Where are you living? Like, whatever those areas of you, whatever those areas of your wheel are lacking, take some time now just to, again, take inventory of where you're at and also where you want to be, because getting clear on these things is so powerful because it gives you a compass of where you want to go. And for me, I find whenever I do these exercises where I check in with myself, it just gives me that spark and that motivation. Because again, it comes down to awareness. The more that you come to know yourself and the more that you get clear on, again, who you are and where you want to be, the more that you will actually take action to choose differently, because it all comes down to that choice, friends. So this is where I want to end for today. I feel like the topic of personal development, again, I could do many, many episodes on this. I could dive into all the different things, but I feel like as it relates to personal branding and as it relates to this first episode of just, again, excavating, diving a little deep to understand where we're at, I feel pretty good just kind of leaving us there with these takeaways to take inventory, to come to know ourselves a little bit deeper. I love talking about this stuff. If there are any books, podcasts, programs, mentors that anyone is curious about, I feel like I actually have to do a list. Speaking of, I do have, and this is like a total work in progress because I want to keep growing this and developing, but I kind of just got a download of having a resource library on my website. If you go on my website and you click on goods, you will see my everyday essentials, which are the products that I love to leverage and lean on every single day. And a lot of those are books. Books have been powerful teachers for me and helping me just, again, garner more awareness of myself. So I have a list of my favorite books on my website. And as I'm recording this episode now, I'm realizing like, I think I probably should just expand that resource library and just drop so many more of these modalities that I've leaned on, because they have been so invaluable in helping me connect deeper with myself. But for anyone listening that's curious and wants to know more, I'm more than happy to share. So DM me, send me an email, reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff. Like I can literally talk about this stuff for days. So yeah, just letting people know, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Love talking about this stuff. I could totally talk about this stuff for days, but we will call it a wrap today. We broke ground today, but we're going to be diving deeper next week. And yes, we're going to continue with personal development, more tangible, specific questions as it relates to your gifts, as it relates to your story, as it relates to your values, all these beautiful things. It's just going to get better and better. So tune in next week, friends, for more. And if you are interested at all in any of the content, especially in this season that I'm going to be diving into related to personal branding, my next cohort for the Homecoming Workshop is launching September 3rd. I am dropping the link in the show notes. Be sure to get on the wait list because this is going to be a magical journey, 12 weeks long. I'm keeping the cohort super duper small again, like I did the first one, only 8 spots available. I want to keep it so personal and intimate so every participant and individual in this program can reap the most amazing benefits ever. But if you are someone who's interested in diving deeper to understand, yes, who you are as a person, building your personal brand, but also if you're a business owner, how that translates in your business, this is the workshop for you, my friends. More details will be shared as the weeks unravel, but if you're interested, get on that wait list. I would love to have you. Thank you so, so much, friends. I hope you have a lovely day and happy journaling. Hi again, it's me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you were able to garner some takeaways and nuggets for your personal home journey. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you left a rating and review. And if you'd like to connect deeper, find me at Studio Dumka on Instagram, where I share content on all things home, of course. Sending a big, cozy, homey hug your way, friends. Till next time.